really happy to be back with Hollywood Kitchen. It's been a little bit. I will explain everything that happened. Okay, so after my Easter episode of Mary Pickford, I had been wanting to do the Rita Hayworth cake episode of the Rita Hayworth Angel Food Cake. And first off, my friend and Rita Hayworth biographer, Caren Roberts-Frenzel, who authored this book on Rita, she travels a lot. So she was in LA for a hot minute, and I got her to sit down, and we did an 1.5 hour pre-recorded interview that was riveting. It was just fantastic. And I got back to my apartment. I pulled up the video, no audio. I do not know why. I think we shot it on Karen's computer maybe, and it's a different model than I'm not sure, but I sent it to Keith. Shout out to Keith, my editor friend, and Keith's like, this is not savable. So much to my chagrin, we had to redo the entire thing over again from scratch. And then it was TCM time for the TCM festival. And I thought, well, I'll finish this right after TCM. Well, I got COVID.
We don't know how that happened.
Yeah, we all know what happened there. I got COVID. I was horrifically sick for 2 full weeks, and that was very
everybody else who went to the TCM.
Yeah, along with about 90% of the attendees.
Yeah, and I didn't for some reason. I was with you guys like constantly.
Well, we sat together for the.
I know. You were breathing all over me.
And I was totally like, oh my God, everybody who's gone anywhere near me is good. Annette and Anna stayed with me. They didn't get it.
Interesting.
And the last day I felt so sick, I told them, I said, I'm going to stay at the other end of my apartment. Y'all need something, just holler. Otherwise, But any case, so I got over COVID. I'm totally fine now. And then last week it was Mother's Day. And I thought, well, everybody's probably busy with their families. So long story short, today is the day. And I'm finally back. I'm very happy about it. I have missed you guys, and I've missed doing these episodes. So we're going to have a lot of fun today. With me as always, frequently, Danny Miller, my friend, entertainment journalist, and also writer, and my friend, biographer, and author and writer, Lara Gabrielle, author of The Captain of Her Soul, The Life of Marion Davies. So I'm so happy to be back doing this and to be back with both of you.
So happy to be back. And full disclosure to everybody watching, I haven't yet made the cake. So right now I'm in the middle of beating egg whites. So if I go on mute, it's because I'm beating egg whites and I don't want everybody to hear the roar of the egg white beating machine.
I understand. And by the way, Danny went ahead and made the cake in advance because there's some of these recipes, as we have all learned, that are just really hard to make live on camera. Mm-hmm. And so Danny thought it would just be way easier to have the cake made in advance, and we'll talk about it.
Well, I wanted to unveil it because also you're supposed to cool it for like 2 hours, inverted. I followed it to the letter, Rita. I sifted the flour 4 times with the sugar. I mean, it's kind of in a way, angel food cake is the simplest kind of cake to make, but you got to do it right. And I'm not sure I did. So we'll see later.
We'll see. But you know what's interesting, though, in researching this episode, first off, I want to say this recipe comes to us from a cookbook from 1937 called Famous Stars' Favorite Foods. This is a really rare book. It took me a long time to find a copy. And this is the Rita recipe that's in the book. And this book was edited by a woman. Her name is Fanny Sniff. And I'm not making this up at all.
You need to devote your life to researching Fanny Sniff.
Fanny Sniff,
okay.
Editor.
I'll be looking her up later.
And this book came out in 1938. So this was early in Rita's career.
Really early.
When I sat down with Caren Roberts-Frenzel, which you'll see later in the interview, one of the questions I asked her was, okay, did Rita cook? And she said, absolutely not. That was not her thing. And I said, it's funny, though, because I have come across so many publicity photos of Rita cooking in a kitchen, smiling. That in fact, I even have some myself. There's quite a number of photos of her doing that. And honestly, I only found this is the only recipe I found in a book. And then one of the photos I have that Caren sold me, it's Rita cooking in a kitchen, and there's a salad dressing recipe on the back of it. But other than that, and this, there's nothing else, which you'd think, given her popularity, that she'd be more ubiquitous. Like, say, there's a truckload of Norma Shearer, a truckload of Joan Crawford. Like, there's some of them where everywhere you turn, they're popping up. And it's just funny to me that you'd think Rita would have been in a lot more of these than she was.
Well, and it's interesting, this one's early on because she looks different to me in the third. It was before her full glamour
Transformation.
1940s thing. She had a lower hairline. So maybe once she became Gilda, it was like, she's beyond the kitchen. Who knows?
Well, I mean, and I do want to add that again, as I feel the need to explain to people maybe watching who don't know who Rita was, because sometimes that happens. Rita Hayworth was trained as a dancer from early childhood, and she wound up becoming a movie star. And she was probably one of the sexiest, most beautiful women on the entire planet, dubbed the love goddess in the 1940s. That was really her heyday. And I think she was very underrated as an actress because she could do comedy, she could do drama, she could do noir, she could do western, she could do a lot more than I think people really, really realized. And
can I just jump in and add something about that really quickly?
Please.
So one thing that I find so fascinating about Rita Hayworth is that she was able to be these characters, all kinds of different characters, right? Including people like these fiery femme fatale like Gilda, when in real life she was this very shy, quiet, retiring person. And people don't really, I mean, people in the film world who know about Rita Hayworth know this, but I feel like people who watch Gilda just sort of to watch Gilda, they don't know how incredibly shy, painfully shy she was. So it speaks to her brilliance as an actress, that she was able to overcome this the reality of her personality to play these really high octane characters.
And there's that famous quotation that I haven't heard isn't from her, that explaining her not the best picks of men throughout her life, but that they go to bed with Gilda, they wake up with me, and it's like she can't live up to it. So she just doesn't like that. But God, she's, to me, and I shouldn't be focusing on this, but like her and Ava Gardner, it's like they're so beautiful, it almost hurts to look at them. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I read a quote somewhere from her second husband, Orson Welles, who said, the whole Gilda thing is completely false. It's like Lon Chaney or something. It had absolutely nothing to do with who she really was.
Yeah.
And you're right, Lara. I mean, that's amazing that she could transform herself. And I think one of the problems is, as Danny pointed out, people couldn't get past Gilda. Like that image and that role was so, I think the word I would use is intoxicating. It was so intoxicating that people couldn't separate that from the real person. And I think that happens a lot with some of these stars. People can't separate the on-screen image from the real human being underneath that. And I think that, sure. I mean, how many other stars had that problem? A lot.
Well, there was, Marilyn Monroe was the first one that comes to mind, that she was playing these characters on screen, and in reality, she was like writing poetry at home, and super intellectual. So, yeah.
Yeah. And even though Rita did have some good parts after that, I agree with you and think she had a much bigger range than the studios would even allow her to attempt. Whenever she did a more unusual part, it's like, wow, that was great.
Definitely.
Although let's just be clear, she's fantastic in Gilda. I mean, put the blame on Mame. Like, who could do that? And as Kimberly Truller talks about that dress that is like just engineered to her body, that like would not even work on any other human. It's one of the most incredible numbers in the history of film.
Yeah, but she's also great in the Strawberry Blonde.
Yes, which we just saw at the festival.
Yeah, but she's also great in Only Angels Have Wings. Those roles that were not at all like the ones that she became. So
can I share my favorite film? And it's for very selfish reasons. Have you ever seen Down to Earth with Larry?
Oh my God.
So it's kind of a sequel in a way to Here Comes Mr. Jordan, because Mr. Jordan's in it and she plays the goddess Terpsichore. I think that's how you pronounce it. But the reason I love the film, it's this great musical where then she comes to Earth as Kitty Pendleton to take over Larry Parks is doing a play. He's directing a musical based on Terpsichore, and she's so horrified at how they're portraying her that she gets the woman fired and she takes over. But the reason I love it especially is because his name in the film is Danny Miller. So I once spent like practically 24 hours straight editing down. I can put a link to it later if you like. Rita Hayworth saying, "Oh, Danny Miller, I just love you so much. Oh, Danny Miller." So that's my, and it's, boy, she's in brilliant Technicolor where you get to see her red hair.
It's like it's like an early version of Xanadu almost. I mean, in more ways than one.
You know, another movie that I think really was kind of a bellwether of what would happen in the future was Blood and Sand, because Caren and I talk about this later, but you've got Tyrone Power, Linda Darnell, Rita Hayworth, Anthony Quinn, and you got Technicolor. So there's so much beauty, your eyes feel like they can't handle it.
Yeah.
And that was before the full Rita Hayworth transformation. So you can see just, I mean, how incredibly beautiful she was even before they did all that stuff to her hair.
And she's so seductive and sexy with Anthony Quinn and Tyrone Power in that film that it's kind of definitely kind of hints at what is to come with Gilda, with Lady from Shanghai, with some of these other roles that she was to play.
My first time I saw her on the big screen, I was living in Paris at the time when I was in college. And I remember this theater on Avenue Macmont, you know, remember that old theater that showed revival films, Lara? Did you ever go there?
No, my choice was always the one on Rue Christine.
Love that one.
Yeah.
Paris.
Yeah, they had revival houses that were great. But anyway, they showed CoverGirl in this gorgeous print. And I was like, my jaw hit the floor. And she's, I think, one of the, 5 or 6 people that have starred in their film opposite both Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire, who both said, she doesn't get the credit, even though she comes from that background, as being this amazing dancer.
Oh my God, you watch the Shorty George, you know, the Shorty George dance that she does in You Were Never Lovelier, right? And it's just like remarkable. Was it You Were Never Lovelier? Is that when she does that dance? No, I don't think so. Maybe, shoot, now I don't remember.
But it is weird that you don't immediately think dancer when that is her background. And Fred Astaire, remember the quote where he said, "Don't tell anyone," but because he'd always be asked, "Who's your favorite partner?" And one time he did say, "Well, it's Rita Hayworth. She was amazing. He felt she danced like he did."
Yeah,
and that was my praise.
Yeah, but she's a brilliant dancer. And he had that quote about how she would he would teach her the steps before lunch, and then she would mull over the steps during lunch, and then afterwards she would have it perfectly. Like she had this brain for dance steps.
Yeah.
Yes, I just love her so much. I think the first time I saw her was on the big screen in CoverGirl too, and I had the same reaction Danny had. It was just like you just blink several times, thinking, "Am I seeing what I think I'm seeing?" Because she's so exquisitely beautiful. It's like Caren and I talk about later. I always kind of feel frustrated with that film though, because the Gene Kelly character, he doesn't want Rita Hayworth to succeed, and his idea of success is giving up her dream and to be with him and not have her own career. And so there's a lot of stuff in that movie that's like, like I find myself sometimes having to fast forward past certain.
Then watch Down to Earth, because she runs the show in that. I mean, she gets Larry Parks to do everything she wants him to do, and it's brilliant. Can we talk about the cake a little bit?
Yes, about the cake. Okay, so the cake has come, as I mentioned, from this 1938 cookbook, and it's an angel food cake, which I know those can be kind of challenging. So Danny, tell me about the process of making the angel food cake.
There's very few ingredients, a cup of flour, and I don't know if you did, it didn't say to, so maybe I did veer here, but I think I used cake flour because that's usually what you use for angel food. And maybe in 1938, it was more like cake flour, who knows? Yeah. With a cup and a half of sugar and a cup and a half of egg whites, which is a pretty large amount. It took me, I think, depending on the size of your egg, I was just kept adding them, about 13, I think. It was a lot of egg whites. And then then there's a little salt, a little vanilla, a little cream of tartar. First and then this quirky thing is that you sift the flour and measure it with half the sugar and have to do it 4 times. And I did it in deference to Margarita Carmen Cancino, aka Rita Hayworth. So I kept sifting, and it does become very fine. And it's a delicate cake. So then you beat your egg whites. First, just a little bit till they're foamy. You add your salt and your cream of tartar. Then you beat the bejesus out of them until they're stiff but not dry. And then you slowly, this is the trick. I don't know if you've made stuff like this before, Lara, but the trick is folding the flour in and not deflating the whole thing. I'm pretty good at folding, but my cake has descended a little bit, as we'll see soon. You bake it in an ungreased, you have to have an angel food cake
Special pan, just
pans. Usually they have a removable bottom, and they have these things because when it's done, and it takes a hell of a long time to cook. She says an hour and 10 minutes. Our oven is heinously hot, so which may be why it fell. But I did cook it almost an hour, and then you invert it. You don't take it out. You invert it and let it sit there. And they recommend like 2 hours. It has to be completely cool before you unmold it. And what stage are you in, Lara?
I'm still beating the egg whites.
Okay.
So mine's not going to be done by the time we.
Okay, well, that'll take you a month.
Post a picture though when it is done, and post
I will.
the recipe.
Should we unveil mine?
Yes, let's unveil Danny's.
So this isn't it's a little bit of a sunken bowl, so it's not but I've made them before and it goes up to the top of the pan and it stays there. So I'm kind of disappointed that it sank to this level, but let's see how it tastes.
Yeah, let's see how it tastes. And always served with fruit, usually, I think is a great way to do it.
Oh, yes. Oh, I was going to make whipped cream and I forgot to, but
no problem.
Can make some later when we're off camera. Okay. Well, kind of feels like I've made this before. It's my wife's favorite kind of cake for her birthday. At my 1939 New York World's Fair cake server.
Yay.
That perhaps Rita Hayworth was at. Okay. That actually looks high like it's supposed to be.
Okay.
I stand corrected. I'm going to let you taste it first.
This bowl is sunken in. So like when I first saw this cake, I was like, oh, thinking it, but it's definitely has the rise to it.
I think it would be helped by some whipped cream. It would be nice.
Yeah.
I just put fresh berries I got at the farmer's market today. All right, what's the verdict?
Okay, let me take a taste and we'll render our verdict. All right, to Rita.
Little dense, but tasty.
Agreed.
Little dense, but tasty.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And actually, a little the whipped cream would make it perfect.
I think I agree. Totally agree.
So, Carrie, do we know? I mean, I know that these recipes are attributed to Rita, but do we know, who was contributing, who was writing these books?
Well, this particular book is written by or edited by someone named Fanny Sniff.
Yes, we're going to research her.
We're going to research the heck out of that. It's funny. A long time ago, I did a Louise Brooks episode with Thomas Gladish in San Francisco, who you know.
I do know, yes.
His wife collects vintage cookbooks, I guess, as well. And we were talking about the recipe because we know Louise Brooks. I think her idea of cooking was vodka in like a coffee cup. I mean, the woman didn't cook. So
I think she told about 2 true stories in her entire life.
Exactly. But I think Thomas found out the exact recipe word for word that was attributed to Louise in this newspaper column. His wife found in a 1915 cookbook.
Uh-huh.
So we kind of did some detective work and thought, well, maybe whoever was putting out, whatever publicity studio person was putting out this recipe into this newspaper article, just dug into some old cookbook and was like, okay, this is great, this will do, and just assigned it to her. And there's also a lot of patterns, like you see a lot of coffee souffles, or you see a lot of veal
gelatin aspic molds.
Yeah, gelatin aspic. So I kind of wonder if whatever was trendy or cool or hip in the food world at that time, they would just randomly assign it to a star.
Although I think some are real. It just depends on the person. Like the first episode I did, which was Gertrude Berg, I know that was her chicken soup recipe. And I mean, don't you think Norma Shear's bizarro oatmeal sticks probably came from her Canadian upbringing or something?
I don't know though, because Darren Barnes is her expert and, he's writing a biography or a book. And we joke about how she probably didn't even know where the kitchen was in her place. I mean, that's true. And I'm constantly finding Norma recipes, so that they are so darn ubiquitous.
But you know what I'm also wondering? I'm wondering if it has to do with like when are these recipes from?
I get them from fan magazines. I get them from cookbooks. I get them
Yeah,
from newspaper
but I mean like the year.
Well, this one's 38.
This one's 38.
Okay, so Depression era.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so they're probably, you know, using what they have, you
Right.
know, and what they have might be like weird stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and also, we know Vincent Price cooked.
Right.
We absolutely know Joan Crawford cooked. We
Right.
know Marlene Dietrich cooked. I mean, there's some of them
Yes.
that I have talked to their family members and they're eyewitnesses
Right.
to. Sarah Karloff told me, yes, Boris added brandy to, or sherry to guacamole. Like, I asked her about it and she said that's true. She
Oh,
confirmed.
those
So-
people would not allow, I mean, not that I'm a big cook, but I wouldn't allow, you know, if you do cook, you're not going to allow someone to like say this is your recipe. So yeah, I think it would be interesting to do a survey of all the ones you've done and like how many do we believe are really the person. But you know, like maybe this is a pretty standard recipe. Some of the there's a few little quirks, and okay, maybe Rita Hayworth didn't make it, but you know, maybe they just liked it. Oh, I like angel food cake, or here's a recipe I've used that I got from my own cookbook. Who knows?
Or maybe it comes from Rita's mom. I mean, you know, who
Okay.
knows?
That's true. Well, there's a recipe I have for Gary Cooper, and it says Mrs. Cooper made this for Gary.
Mhm.
Or
This is growing on me. I like
Yeah.
that.
and then so that could be part of it. And another thing is too, they could have just matched the star with the star personality with the kind of food it is. Like, for example, Betty Davis was a New Englander.
Right.
So if you're going to have a New England dish, you know what I mean? It kind of makes sense in a way that there's certain stars that would pair with certain things. When I did the Fay Ray episode, I sent her daughter like at least a dozen, I think, like recipes I'd found in magazines and cookbooks. And the daughter wrote back, Victoria Riskin, and she said, none of this is correct.
Oh,
I was like,
interesting.
fair enough. You were there. What'd she make? And she's like, here it is. And she sent me the Caesar salad recipe, a scan of it. And it was from a restaurant Fay Ray loved to go to. And it literally had her fingerprints and oil on the side of the paper.
Oh.
I'm like, okay, well, that's authentic, you know, but again, some of these we can find out, and some of them it's just a guess. But you know, every time people ask me about it, I always tell them, I'm like, well, it's a fun way to talk about them, even if they didn't legitimately make it. It's a fun way to explore who they were and their lives and their careers. And
You know what I would be
Yeah.
interested if
Sure.
you did find like a 1944 Rita Hayworth recipe, what would it be? Like when she was the true femme fatale guild,
Exactly.
you know, it wouldn't be angel food cake. This is like, just look at that picture of her. I mean, it's just like this innocent
yeah,
little,
And also 1944 is the height of the rationing of all of these things that we're putting in this angel food.
oh my God. Yeah. A cup and a half of egg whites and all that sugar. Forget it.
Right. Yeah, forget it.
exactly. Well, plus, there actually is a recipe I would like to make at a certain point for an episode where it's all about rationing during World War II.
That would be fun.
Yeah, I would like to do that.
We should do a group thing with a bunch of different World War II recipes.
Right? So the rationing episode. But so I think, because again, maybe what year was Only Angels Have Wings? Was that 39?
39.
So I was going to say the angel food cake, angels have, I wonder.
Maybe.
That's very possible.
Well,
Yeah,
and
this is 38.
yeah.
Could be.
Probably filming it. Yeah.
And you know what's funny too? I was thinking about, I love Gloria Graham, and I thought, oh, I'd like to do a Gloria Graham recipe. I have looked high and low, I can find nothing. And anytime you do any kind of searching, all you get is recipe for trouble, Gloria Graham, and blah blah blah. So I'm like, all right, I give up on this one. I cannot find anything on her. So it's weird how there's some stars that were just so all over the place,
Mhm.
and others you can just find nothing on,
Yeah.
you know. But
Okay. The dough is good of mine. I just tasted it.
You know, it's interesting though with Rita Hayworth, because I mean, what I've read about her, like one of the reasons why it's said, and maybe Caren has a different take on this, that her marriage to Orson Welles didn't work out. She claimed that she wanted to settle down, have a home, and he was just wanted to be off and, you know, going to restaurants and not having a single place where they lived. So, you know, maybe there was partly this desire in her, but you know, whether or not that would translate to being in the kitchen, who knows? I think Gloria Graham never saw the inside of a kitchen.
No.
Frankly.
I would bet that she wouldn't. Yeah.
But like Marlene Dietrich was legendary. You know, we talk about that in the Dottie Ponadel book. She was just bringing everyone her soup, all her foods, her stews, everything. She, you know, she loved to cook. There weren't that many of them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, but it's just an interesting way to look at the star, to look at who they were, how they were, and also to look at the times they were in too, you know, in terms of the Great Depression, World War II, the era. It's just, there's so many things I think you can kind of learn from recipes in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
They kind of tell a story on their own.
And actually, this one, although it has its quirks, you know, was very doable. Some of the ones that we look at, like, what does that even mean? And then often they don't, oh, this one actually did give the degree that your oven should be, because a lot of times they just say, in a
warm oven,
in a hot oven, in a cool oven.
Yeah, that surprised me when I saw that they actually had the degrees.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. Later this fall, I'm going to do a Buster Keaton recipe, and I can't tell the details about it quite yet, but I was looking at different Keaton family recipes, and one of the ones I passed on was the lobster thermidor. I was like, I am afraid of cooking lobster. I've never done it before, but also doing it live on camera. I was like, what else you got? You know?
Yeah. I will not cook lobster. Well, I mean, I'm somewhat kosher anyway, so I don't eat lobster. But I wouldn't do it because of the animal issues, you know. Like,
I've done it, and it was one of the most traumatizing things of my entire life.
I couldn't. I haven't even eaten it. I don't think I've ever eaten
it. Oh, really? Because I do love it,
Yeah.
that I am. But yeah, it's horrible to throw a live thing in boiling water.
Really, couldn't do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it for ethical reasons.
Is that why it's not kosher, because of the inhumane way you have to prepare it? I wonder.
It's because it's a bottom feeder.
Okay.
Yeah. So bottom feeders aren't supposed
But
to
it's kind of funny because with Buster, you'd think like the recipe being put out there would be something a little more like Lon Chaney, the potato biscuit. Like, even I doubt he cooked, but potato biscuit seemed kind of fitting to who he is.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, I believe that if he cooked,
Yeah,
like, potato
maybe
biscuits
he
would be
did.
a thing.
Yeah.
Do you get into, in your talk with Caren, I mean, again, as I was just saying online, like the last thing I would want to do is just talk about these people through the prism of the men they were with. However, it's so interesting, her 5 husbands, I mean, Ali Khan, Orson Welles, Dick Haynes, which I often forget about. And none of her marriages lasted more than 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Some of them seemed very, you know, passionate and like real, like Orson Welles, who praised her until like the night before he died. He had an interview where he's saying what a wonderful person she was, but they just couldn't be together, you know. But do you get into that? I mean,
We do. Caren feels that Rita was super jealous and thinks that he's constantly cheating when he wasn't. And it sort of became like this fulfilling prophecy to where he finally did.
But it speaks to insecurity on Rita's part. I mean, you know, how she thought that she was always going to be left.
Right. Although she also would pick men that weren't exactly homebodies. I mean, the Ali Khan was with every woman in Hollywood.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that she's just such a complicated woman, Rita.
Well, I think too, with Orson, I think that they fell in love, but they didn't want the same things. Because as we talked about, she wanted a home, a family, a normal life, and she needed a tremendous amount of attention nonstop.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm in New York doing this. I'm making a movie. I'm raising money. I mean, he was all over the place, and she was lonely, and she felt he was kind of leaving her out of stuff and ignoring her. And Orson was so career driven. He just didn't have interest in being a husband or a father. And that's what he wanted. So when you don't want the same thing as the other person, and no matter who you are, I think that creates the problem, you know. Same with Ali Khan. Like, that guy partied like a maniac. He was
the original Playboy, for God's sake.
No, the original Playboy. The guy slept around with every woman he could get his hands on. He partied day and night. I mean, so this was not someone who's going to be a father, a husband, give her the home life. Like, she is not going to have what she wants out of this situation.
It still warms my heart to hear about Orson Welles, what he said about her at the end of his life, just like Frank Sinatra never had anything bad to say about Ava Gardner, even though their fights were legendary. You know, you can love someone and not be able to be married to them.
Well, and I think in old Hollywood, they got so carried away because if so many of these stars are married multiple times. And I think part of it was maybe the society mores at the time, where if you dated someone for any length of time, you kind of were pressured to marry. And then also, David Sten told me something very interesting. I asked him about this topic once, and he said, well, Carrie, he said, a lot of these performers are very impulsive people. Yes. And what makes them brilliant on screen can kind of be a problem in their personal lives, because they might be head over heels in love with someone Monday, and then Wednesday morning go like, oh my God, what have I done? So, you know, that impulsivity makes them so talented and great at what they do, but it causes havoc when you put that into
and in addition to that, it's a bubble. I mean, Hollywood was a bubble. Like you would be at the studio all day, you'd see the people at the studio all day, you'd go home, you'd see the people at home, you wouldn't go out to the grocery store or to the park to have fun or whatever. So you're meeting who you're meeting, and you maybe have this idea that this is my world, this is love, you know, this is
right. Especially when you're in a, like, she had a long-term relationship, they never married, with Glenn Ford from Gilda, and I mean, you know, you can you're in these embraces with this person. I don't know, I'm not an actor, but that would be confusing.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about somebody like Carole Lombard and William Powell, like, who were married and they loved each other, but they couldn't be married because of the career issues that were pulling both of them away, and, you know, other stuff probably too, but they loved each other for forever, and you know, of course, did My Man Godfrey and all of that, but I think that they were just in, you know, in this situation where it's like, oh, you know, I like this person, I love this person, love means you get married, you know. So
yeah,
like, you couldn't just live with someone like you can today, or just date someone and not get married like you can. Right. It just wasn't, I don't think that was as socially acceptable as it is now.
Right, exactly. Okay, I'm pouring it into the 9-inch what do they say?
You don't grease it.
Yeah, okay, so it's going into the pan, and we'll see how this works out.
Wow, I can't believe you've been whipping those egg whites as we're talking. Good for you.
Yeah, well, we'll see if they were beaten enough.
I think another problem was Rita was so exquisitely beautiful that men just saw her as a prize. And once they got a hold of her or got in a relationship with her or whatever, they didn't know what to do at that point.
Well, and her name is, it will go.
Yeah, Caren talks about that quote, by the way, too. So our conversation was so darn good. Oh. And God bless her, she was willing to record the entire thing all over again.
God love her.
Shout out to Caren, and shout out to Daryl Rooney for letting us use his house to do that in, too. So it was really, really nice of both of them to help me get this done.
Oh, and the old Hollywood family.
Right? Pretty much.
Yeah. I think the only one old enough that as a kid, I remember when she was having her sad descent, and it just strikes me as so weird, because for years, Alzheimer's, although I think the term was coined, you know, many decades earlier, but it just wasn't talked about like it is today. And we called it, to my somewhat shame, but it was pretty common, that it was called Rita Hayworth disease. Yeah, the first person. It was like when Rock Hudson had AIDS, that was the first person a lot of people experienced having that disease.
Yeah.
But did you ever see, I remember seeing it when it was on first run, when she was on the Carol Burnett show. I think that was one of her last appearances.
But she was so good.
Yeah, she was very sweet with Carol. And although in retrospect, of course, I was a little kid, and now when I realize she got diagnosed, and apparently from her daughter, it was going on much before that, like she was only 60. I mean, that is super early.
Yeah.
And that she died at 68 is just so tragic.
It's awful. I mean, it's such a severe, you know, early Alzheimer's.
She had a drinking problem too, which I'm assuming did not help matters.
No. Although still gorgeous on the Carol Burnett show in, I think, 74 or something. Yeah, it was a very sad end, although thank God she did have, you know, her daughters around helping her through that.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it have been great? I mean, if she'd been well and could receive the acclaim that later on, people were giving to these classic film stars, I think she would have been surprised and so touched how much people just worship her.
Yeah, have you ever now? And I'm so upset that this video got taken down. But there was a video of Rita, I think in 1978. So this was like in the Alzheimer's years, where she was. But it was clearly a good day. She was at the Castro, I think, in San Francisco.
Being honored.
Yeah, it was like a Rita Hayworth retrospective, and she was there, and she was talking, and she was really lucid.
Wow.
Yeah, and really, it was clearly a good day for her, because she was, talking with the person, remembering her career and remembering the people she danced with, and remembering her early life dancing in Mexico, and all
And
that.
she didn't seem off to you when you saw that video.
No, I mean it's audio. It was a video with like a picture, but it was somebody had recorded it. And if you were looking for it, you might have, heard a little something going on here and there, but for the most part, it was just a really beautiful tribute. And I wish that video were still up. Somebody took it down.
Yeah, I'm so happy she got that late in the game.
Yeah.
What I've kind of learned being around seniors is some days they have great days and some days they'll have really bad days. And sometimes that even happens in the same day. Like they can be doing so well and then lunchtime rolls around or dinner time, and then just it's a very up and down kind of thing.
And how memory can be so elusive in one area, and then they can talk about something that happened in 1942. So maybe that helped Rita remember certain things in her career.
I'm sure. Yeah. That's the way my grandpa had Alzheimer's, and he couldn't tell me what happened, 10 minutes ago, but he could tell me, about his mother and about how the languages his mother spoke and how she came over to the United States. And it's amazing. I mean, it's a fascinating disease.
Mm-hmm. Sad, but
it's
fascinating.
sad.
So awful.
I just wish they could cure it and stop it from happening.
Yeah.
Well, happily, you say her daughter's head of Alzheimer's Foundation.
I forget what the name of the foundation is. I'll look it up and post a link. But Yasmin,
it's called the Rita Hayworth Foundation. It might have changed names by now. Unfortunately, they've been doing that, like with Gilda's Club and all that. But let me see.
I have to hand it to them for making that announcement back then, long before Reagan made his announcement, because it was brave to do and really is helpful to know, that people have this disease.
Yeah, it's called the Alzheimer's Association, and they have a Rita Hayworth Gala every year.
Oh.
And Caren told me there's even been Rita Hayworth golf tournaments that she's gone to. So there's different events, I think, that help to raise funds and raise awareness also.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite Rita Hayworth movie?
Well, I've said my selfish one, Down to Earth, but I do love Gilda with all my heart. And I love CoverGirl, and I love You Were Never Lovelier. They're just
I really like You Were Never Lovelier. It's such a charming little movie to watch. I do love CoverGirl. I know some people have some mixed feelings about CoverGirl. I think it's fantastic. What else do I love? The Lady from Shanghai is crazy and warped and annoyingly annoyingly plotless, I guess we could say. But I love her in it. That she's
blonde hair and all. It's heaven.
Exactly. And of course the blonde hair, of course, is to drive Harry Cohn crazy. So we like that. And I like what else? I'm trying to think.
Wasn't it interesting? You were at that Strawberry Blonde screening, Lara?
Oh yes, of course, the Strawberry Blonde. Yes.
Yeah, and it was like, that was pre-full glamour girl, and it was like a different part. She was almost the heavy in some ways.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting movie because it says a lot without saying a lot. Like, like Rita Hayworth's character is clearly trapped in this marriage that she is unhappy in. And that's communicated by when she kisses Jimmy Cagney in the dark.
I thought it was a very well written and interesting script for the time.
Yeah, and just deep, nuanced characters. It's fascinating, that movie.
Let's see what people are saying on social media, because I want to kind of see here. Leslie Apple, hello Leslie. She says some movie press books included recipes linked to the female star that could be run in newspapers.
I never saw that in a press book. How interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting, definitely. And yeah, let's see.
Can't stop with this.
Krista Lawler, I love Caren Roberts-Frenzel. I do too. She's a wonderful person. A lot of people making comments about Alzheimer's and dealing with a family member with Alzheimer's or being a caretaker. Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Well, and I remember even as a kid, because a lot of times she would go to events and be acting strangely, and they would assume she was drunk, which was even more just kind of tragic and sad. And of course, she did have a history with alcohol as well. But that was like, in some ways, then it was, just so much new information when we found out she had this other disease.
Yeah, and there's that terrible photo that was taken of her when she was coming off an airplane.
Yeah.
That kind of blew up and made everything.
I think those kind of photos are so cruel.
Hideous.
It's like you're looking at someone at their absolute lowest possible moment, and then to me, that is just unconscionable.
And this is before social media.
Yeah,
way
this is before social
so
media.
It's only worse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like scavenging, it's like
I mean, I wonder, considering how incredibly famous and how beautiful and how renowned she was. I know that paparazzi, like we know them today, weren't around, but do you think she was like hounded at Ciro's? And I don't know how it worked then. And maybe they were protected more.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that she was. I know that when she was in the hospital, they would, give false reports to the press so that the press wouldn't come and hound her.
I mean, I posted a candid shot earlier today on Facebook of her having dinner with Orson Welles somewhere, but they're so gorgeous that you almost wonder if it was like in cahoots with the photographers who were there, Yeah,
it's really interesting because that photo, I found other photos from that same night. The photo that you posted, she looks really sad to me.
Like really? Interesting.
Yeah, like she looks kind of I don't know, like there's something that's upsetting. But then in other photos, like from maybe half an hour later or something, she's laughing and and it's clearly not. It could be that she was just listening intently to somebody, but to me she looked sad.
I've read in the books is that after the marriage to Ali Khan did not work out, that was kind of the beginning of just a downhill slide.
Well, there was one husband after that, and I'm sure Caren knows more about it, but who was a real son of a bitch.
Oh, Dick Hames. Oh my God.
Oh, I think it was after him.
Well, James Hill. That was another.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rita.
Well,
yes.
I think
terrible taste in men.
I think people took advantage of her vulnerability, of her beauty, I think they just kind of swooped in. And again, they wanted this gorgeous sex goddess and then had no idea what to do once they, it's just sad. She deserved better. I think.
She really did.
And
yeah.
I really wish she could have had a much happier life. And it seems like too, from what I've read, she wasn't necessarily happy making films. Like she wanted a normal life. She wanted to retire. And that was, I think she thought Ali Khan was like the key to that. Like if she could just move to Europe, marry him, then she'd have a totally different life, but it didn't.
And she had, let's face it, she had to deal with a lot of bullshit at Columbia, I mean, she didn't have the best people working for her, even though she achieved these amazing heights of fame and beauty and success.
Yeah, I mean, talk about misogyny, like so much misogyny at Columbia she was going through.
Because I'm sure Harry Cohn was just on her like white on rice 24/7 to get her to sleep with him and bugging the dressing room and trying to control her every move. And
Yeah.
it's like you were in a prison cell with gold bars, you know?
Mhm.
So I've heard some people describe that.
Interesting.
Interesting. There's this woman who lived near us, I mean, years earlier, but I researched her, Virginia Van Up. Have you heard of her?
She was a screenwriter at Columbia.
And she worked on Gilda. Yeah. And I always I've read articles about her. I'd love to do more research on her. And like, was she a confidant for Rita? Because I think she really was in her corner. And if only there were more women behind the scenes, she could have had a very different experience. But I was always happy that Virginia Van Up, and I love that name.
Me too.
Was a fan of Rita's.
Yeah, I know that she was close with Shira Hafran, a secretary.
That was her secretary. Yeah.
Yes, her secretary. Yeah,
Oh,
so yeah, they were confidants, I guess. Yeah.
Need some good girlfriends back then.
Seriously.
Right.
Yeah.
Shifra Haran, I think was her name. Shifra. Shifra.
Oh, it sounds Israeli.
It does. Yeah, I'm not sure where she was from, actually.
And interesting that, I mean, because she's Margarita Cancino and her father in Spain, and it was I think it was Harry Cohn who like, you can't be the exotic girl anymore, so Hayworth is her mother's maiden name.
Yeah.
They wanted to wipe that kind of ethnic identity out of her, because some of her early roles were, like what poor Rita Moreno had to play, the exotic girl.
Yeah.
But I don't know if she is at all embraced by the Hispanic or Latino community today as like one of, their own.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit hard because she's Spanish.
Right.
So she's not Latina, but she's Hispanic.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a weird area.
And do you know about her? I know she had two brothers, and I think they were in the industry too.
Yeah, Vernon,
Eduardo.
and Eduardo, right? And Vernon did say like voiceovers or something. I mean, he was like in the industry.
Interesting. Well, I hope they were a source of support to her. I've seen a lot of pictures of them together.
I think that they were. I think they were really close.
And I just think she's one of those stars that she's still, how some stars you look at and you think, okay, they were beautiful by the standards of, whatever you're, but Rita is still, her looks are timeless. Like if she was walking down the street like today, heads would still turn,
I mean, that Life magazine thing I have up on our mantle over there, the famous shot that was, I always read the number 2 pinup after Betty Grable. I would have put it at number 1.
Same.
Is so unbelievably stunning. And I remember like reading from the photographer that like a light bulb went off and created these weird shadows, and that's what made it what it is. And it's
but that's also the photo that was put on the bomb,
which apparently she was not happy about.
She was horrified about that.
Yeah. But I heard that Harry Cohn wouldn't let her speak out because it would have been deemed un-American, so she wasn't allowed to.
Yeah.
I mean, a horrifying thing that they did there, but she was beloved.
And I think too, she could also, like, I could see her being in films today because she's just got that kind of presence that's still very contemporary, even though it's also of the 30s, 40s, 50s. She's such a naturalistic performer.
Yeah.
And Harry Cohn apparently used to say she's a great listener.
Mm-hmm.
Like give other people the dialogue, let her listen and react,
Oh, how great would it have been to see her in her 70s and 80s in movies. I never saw her last film. I think it was in 74. Have either of you?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I mean, when she was having a lot of problems remembering lines, and they thought it was because of the alcohol. She clearly had some brain issues going on. So
honestly, I gotta admit something. Sometimes there are films that are really painful for me to watch if I really love the performers, because you see that they're at the end and they're not doing well, and you love them so much and you want them to be okay, and that they're clearly not. And I find that kind of painful to watch, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're human beings just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then sometimes it's the opposite, like, oh my God, they were never better. And here they are, 80 years old in a film.
Yeah. I was just reminded, Danny, when you said she was a great listener, I was reminded of a quote from somebody, and of course now I can't remember who it was. It might have been Fred Astaire, actually, who said that Rita would be on screen and be doing all the things that she needed to do. And then when it was time to be off, like off screen, she would retreat to her chair and just sit and like not interact with anybody. Like the set would be noisy and people running around, and he said that never seemed to affect her. Like she just kind of like sat still in her chair. Yeah.
What I have a hard time grasping, if she, was very shy and maybe insecure in many ways. Yeah, you look at something like, let's just take Gilda, because so many of us know that. That is a woman with such confidence. Like, I am this person. I am beautiful. I am powerful. Like, I just don't get it. And I'm not an actor, at how you can appear that way on screen and, not have that. Or she was just.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was an outlet for her. I mean, maybe she was a human being. She certainly had those emotions inside of herself, and maybe that was the way that she expressed them.
Right. Like, I don't have to be self-conscious because this is a character, but if I'm myself, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, like drawing on emotions that you really have.
Mm-hmm.
Let's think of actors who had a screen persona that was 180 degrees opposite who they were in real life. Like, of course, we've already kind of talked about Marilyn Monroe. I've always heard Dan Duryea was like a family man, loved his kids, took up the Boy Scouts, like he was. But then he's the slimiest, evil guy in film noir. And apparently that was absolutely nothing like he was in his real life.
Interesting. I can see that would be really fun to have that outlet to get to be something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And you certainly don't want to be typecast. I just wish that Rita had the opportunity to do really complex roles. Because I think she definitely could have pulled it off.
Yeah, I think that she could have pulled it off. Yeah, I wonder how far that sort of insecurity spanned, though. I mean, maybe she didn't feel comfortable allowing herself to do those really complex roles.
Yeah.
Or maybe they had the attitude, which I think a lot of the studio chiefs did, of, well, this formula worked, we're going to keep doing this formula. The Gilda thing works. Okay, let's do Loves of Carmen. Let's do Affair in Trinidad. Let's do, money.
That's another one I love. That's another one I love that I forgot to mention earlier, Loves of Carmen.
Lynn Ford again.
Yeah. And, I just think that she's so Carmen.
Well, and not to keep pushing this film down to earth because of Danny Miller being in it, but it's almost like she gets to play a parody of herself. She is the literal goddess of love. And so she is supposed to be the most beautiful woman that ever walked the earth. And she's constantly like saying that to everyone who will listen, but in a kind of tongue-in-cheek way. It must have been fun for her to play on her own image. It's like a parody of Gilda.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, are you guys ready to watch Caren's interview?
Yeah,
let's do it.
And I've never seen her book, so I'm dying to look through that.
Anyway, I'm about to show you guys the interview I did about a month ago, maybe more than that, with Caren and Caren Roberts-Frenzel. This is an excellent book. It came out around 2001, and you can still find it at used bookstores. You can still find it online. It's excellent, and I'm going to play the interview with her right now. Hi, it's Carrie, and welcome to another episode of Hollywood Kitchen. I recently sat down with my friend Caren Roberts-Frenzel and Rita Hayworth, biographer. We had an hour-and-a-half long riveting discussion on all things Rita Hayworth.
We thought it was riveting. Anyway.
We thought it was riveting. I get home, and there's absolutely no sound on the video. So I wept openly, and I was very upset.
It was so sad.
So sad.
Fun, but
then graciously, Caren has agreed to re-sit down with me and redo this discussion, and here we are. And I'm so grateful. Thank you for joining
thank
me.
you for having me. And my dog Vivian is also here for the ride.
Pets around at Hollywood Kitchen. That's a thing. So, and Caren is the author of this fantastic book about Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth, a photographic retrospective. Yep. And where can people find this?
Well, it came out in 2001, so it's not in print any longer, but you can find it on eBay. Sometimes it shows up for $100, sometimes it shows up for $20, so you can usually find it at a pretty reasonable price. However, if you buy it on Amazon, it's usually very, very overpriced. So don't buy it on Amazon, buy it on eBay if you choose to buy it at all. But it's a great book, I think. Anyway,
yes,
it's a labor of love.
Tell me, okay, so you told me the story the last time on our ill-fated audio.
You're going to get so bored hearing these stories.
No, I will never get bored hearing stories. Tell me how this book came to be, because you had a great origin story, if you will, about how this book came to happen. So tell us that. Yeah,
well, I'd always wanted to, and I've loved her since I was a little girl. I first saw her in You Were Never Lovelier dancing with Fred Astaire, and I absolutely thought she was the most beautiful, graceful woman I'd ever seen, glamorous. So that's where I first began to get interested in her. I was about 10. And then from that point on, I've always loved vintage photographs. So I started collecting vintage photographs of her and continued to do so. And always had, there was a book that came out on Marilyn Monroe called Her Life in Pictures, and it was by James Spada. And then later, our friend Daryl Rooney came out with this beautiful book on Jean Harlow. That's a photographic biography. They were both photographic biographies. And I really wanted to see one on Rita Hayworth, and one never came out. So I thought, well, I'll try to do it myself. So I always collected pictures with the idea that, hey, maybe I would use this for the book, but I also collected pictures just for my own pleasure. So when I started to, I put the book together in its whole form, and I pitched it to different agents. I wrote about 50 letters to different agents to see if they would represent me. And I had 3 people respond, and one of whom his name was Don Congdon, and he was actually the agent for Bobby Kennedy. And so I thought, well, you can't beat that. I'll take that company with Bobby Kennedy. So that agent submitted it to 25 different publishers, and they all rejected it. So I thought, I was upset about it, but I thought, well, then I'll just do it on my own. So I sent it to Abrams, which is the publisher that I really wanted to do it. They do gorgeous coffee table books, Harry Abrams in New York. And I sent it to them again. And I said, because he had sent it to them and they had said no. And I sent it again, and I didn't hear anything back for about 8 months. And finally I got a letter, and they said, we've been going back and forth on whether to publish it, but we just don't feel like she has name recognition. Like, people remember who she is. Yeah. Which I disagreed with. Yes. So from that, the fact that I was so close was just, painful. So I decided that I would bombard them with how much she is remembered. And every time I saw her in a magazine, every time there was a list of the 100 greatest stars, or you name it, when she was in the media in some way, I would write them and let them know. And it changed their mind. And they said, okay, we'll do it. And it helped that the president of Abrams at the time was a huge Rita fan, thank goodness. And so he was in my corner, but still, just he alone had not been able to get everyone to agree to be on board. So that's how it happened. And then I had some issues with the Aga Khan, because that was Rita Hayworth's stepson, and he didn't want pictures of himself in the book. So I had to take the picture of him out, and he had to approve this, that, and the next thing. And then Rita Hayworth's daughter loved it. I met with her. She loved the book and approved it. And in fact, I have a picture shoot, and I don't have it with me, of her holding the book. It's a beautiful professional photograph of her looking very glamorous holding the book. I mean, she really likes it, and I'm so happy. But so, that took a while, and then finally it happened. And then it was published a week after 9/11, which of course, obviously in the grand scheme of things, my book doesn't matter, but it did hinder sales, of course, as well it should. And it was a horrible thing that happened. But I think that, the book probably would have done better had it been published at a different time. But it still sold out. But, I would have liked to have seen a second printing and things like that. So, but yeah, I was very, very lucky. And it just goes to show that if you persevere and you really think that there's a desire for that out there and really believe in it, that it can happen. So I tell my kids. So
That's a great lesson to learn. Persistence is a really important thing.
Yeah, it is, especially if you really do believe somebody, I know I really wanted a book like this, and there were books out on other people, other stars that was similar, that weren't even as big as she was. So I knew that there was an audience. And she hasn't, unlike some of the stars from the 40s, like let's say Betty Grable or well, not even Jean Tierney is still quite well known, but Betty Grable, she hasn't really stood the test of time as well as Rita. And I think it's because Rita has especially her Gilda look, a very contemporary look.
Mm-hmm.
Betty Grable had very 40s hairstyles.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Yeah. So she, and also she didn't have a lot of scandal, I hate to say, always helps them, stay in the public's mind, unfortunately. But I think that Rita was like kind of the whole package. And then, of course, she had Alzheimer's disease, one of the first people, really the first famous person to acknowledge that that she didn't acknowledge it, but her family acknowledged that she had Alzheimer's disease. So I think a lot of the combination of all those things, she was married to Orson Welles, keep her in public involvement.
It's interesting because this past Thanksgiving, Angie Schneider and I did an episode about Tyrone Power, and we had his grandson, TK Power.
Yeah.
And it was interesting when we talked about it because we were thinking, why isn't he more famous? We love him.
Right.
But then we thought, well, he really didn't have any major scandals.
Huh?
He really wasn't married to any major stars, or you know what I mean?
That's
Linda
right.
Christian was an actress, but not like
Annabella too, but she was not super famous.
Yeah. So no major high profile marriages, no major scandals. And also he made some great films, but they weren't The Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, Citizen Kane. They weren't what I would call like maybe lightning in a bottle type of films.
Exactly.
Like Gilda is her lightning in a bottle. That is like the number one film that is mentioned when her name comes up.
Correct.
So she had that too.
Yes.
She had the film that, because I made great movies. It's just none of them were on that level of being that iconic.
Right.
So it kind of, in a way, outside of people like us, it makes sense that he isn't as well remembered for those
sad.
reasons.
It's sad that he isn't.
Yeah, it's sad because I think he deserves better.
Yeah, I do too.
But I first saw Rita long before TCM even. I saw AMC. They showed Blood and Sand.
Mm-hmm.
And
speaking of Tyrone
Power. And I remember thinking, how can there possibly exist three people that are this pretty? Rita Hayworth, Linda Darnell, and Tyrone Power.
That's right. And Anthony Quinn. Four people.
And among them, Rita stood out because that dance scene she does with Anthony Quinn is probably one of the sexiest things I've ever seen.
That, as well as the scene she does with Tyrone Power, where she's, I mean, it's very sensual, and she's letting him get only so close, and she's, so desirable to him that it's palpable. That's a pretty powerful scene. She was, and they basically, that was not her nature innately. She was incredibly shy. And different directors, Howard Hawks is one I can think of off the top of my head, who said he literally had to say step by step, now do this, now do this, now do this. That didn't come naturally to her to be that way. So that's even more of an accomplishment when you think how well she did it.
Well, I read a quote somewhere from her second husband and director, Orson Welles, who said the whole Gilda thing was completely false. It was like Lon Chaney or something. It had absolutely nothing to do with the real person.
Right.
One of the things that has kind of come up on Hollywood Kitchen several times in our discussions is how the person can be so wildly different from the persona.
Right.
Like who they are off screen almost is like a completely different identity from who they were on.
Which is quite a credit to her acting when you think about it. I mean, people don't give her a lot of credit for her acting, but she was a wonderful actress. Especially, you can see her actually get better and better as her roles continue. But in Gilda, yes, she was, as you know, there's the famous phrase where she said, which people always say incorrectly, and I get kind of defensive about it, because some people will say, so I've seen it written so many times, that she said, men have sex with me or have sex with Gilda and they wake up with me, or they go to bed with Gilda and wake up with me. She never would have said, have sex, go to bed. She was very dignified. She had a very natural dignity. And what she did say, the quote from the interview is, every man I've ever known has fallen in love with Gilda and wakened with me. And that's a much more classy way of saying, they marry me because they think I'm this person that they see on the screen, and I'm not. And she wasn't. She was very shy. And as we talked about the other day, in the movie Gilda, it's actually kind of the same thing. She plays this, character who's trying to make Glenn Ford jealous, and she's dancing and she's acting like she's this, that. And then they show this side of her, which is really that she's very shy and sweet. And, that's in the movie. And she acts both of those parts very believably. But yes, she had a big problem with having to, as she said, Harry Cohn wanted her to live that image until she was 90. Well, you can't live that beautiful love goddess image if you're going to age, which we all do. And that's one of the reasons why she was so excited when Orson Welles had put her in The Lady from Shanghai, because he cut her hair, and she was this beautiful blonde, but they took her long red trademark hair and cut it short, and blonde, and dyed it blonde, and it's absolutely gorgeous. But it was a different look, and the public didn't necessarily like it.
Now, I want you to dispel a rumor, because I have long heard the rumor that they didn't exactly ask Harry Cohn's permission, and that he hit the ceiling when he realized what they had done. Is that true?
I don't believe that's true. You can't make a major film like that and fund it, and he was also knew always what was going on without getting his permission. You couldn't cut the hair of the studio's greatest asset without his permission. I think he, was doing it because he thought maybe it was a good move, or maybe he was just going to take a risk, or
the publicity,
or publicity. Yes. And there was a lot of publicity, but he had to have known what was going on. There's no way Orson was going to walk up to him and say, I cut her hair, and what are you going to do about it? Because that would have been a big to do. So I think that's just a myth. I'm quite sure of it, as a matter of fact.
And when you talked about how men fell in love with Gilda and weakened with her, I think that I've always heard the story that her second husband, Director Orson Welles, saw the Life magazine picture of her in the lingerie, which is stunning, one of the biggest pinups of World War II, and just immediately said, I'm going to marry her.
That's what I've read. Again, that's a good story. I don't know. He did do a radio program with her during that time. She was married to her first husband, Ed Judson. But she and Orson did a radio program in 1941. So they did know each other. And I don't know if that's before or after, probably is after he saw the pinup, but he was such an egotist. I wouldn't put it past him. And then he was also ambitious and usually achieved his goals, and he got that too. So I think that she was a challenge to him. And then of course, when he met her, he wasn't prepared for how docile and sweet she was, because he always talked about just what a sweet person she was, very insecure, and she needed a lot of attention, but just a very sweet person and a good wife.
And it seems like Ali Khan also fell in love with Gilda, almost admittedly. And I read that he used to actually just love it if they'd have a fight, because she'd get very fiery then, and then she was more like Gilda, and when she was not like that, she was very quiet and unassuming, and I think for him maybe even boring, sweet and wonderful and lovely. But this was a man who grew up in a culture of having any woman he wanted, which he continued after he married her, because that was the culture that he grew up in, and she knew that. I think she was hoping he wouldn't be like that once they got married, but of course pretty hard to change a leopard spot. So he didn't change, but again, they always had a wonderful relationship. After, I've got some great pictures of them from 1955 with Rebecca, her daughter, with Orson, and their daughter together, Yasmin, that Yasmin had never even seen before. When I sent her some copies, and they're pictures of them at dinner and playing in the snow and having fun, and they're laughing, all four of them together. So they were still friends after they got divorced. And then he died in a car crash in 1960, and she was devastated, absolutely devastated. And I think, as I mentioned to you before, I think that he was the love of her life. I really do. I think that she really was in love with him, and that, she said being with him was magical. And that's sad when you think about it, because, she met him in 48. They married in 49. She moved to Europe, completely gave up her career, left him in 51 and came back to the States. They reconciled in 52 and finally divorced in 53. But she left her very, she was never, ambitious as far as her career, except at the very beginning. She really wanted a family, and she wanted to have kids, and but she wanted a family that was going to stay together. I can't remember where I was going with this, but she if you look at
So she came back and starred in both Salome and the Affair in Trinidad in 1952, where they were her comeback pictures. And especially in Affair in Trinidad, there is a light that is missing from her eyes. And you see it. If you watch anything pre-48, pre-Loves of Carmen, she's very fiery and very, bright-eyed. And anything after that, her eyes, in photographs and on film, her eyes look so sad. And it's really, and I think it was I think it was, if not the major disappointment in her life, it was one of them, was that marriage ending. And then the marriages after that were, Dick Haynes.
Terrible. He was a famous crooner who basically used her to get attention for his career.
Yeah. And she kind of had to marry him because he was going to be deported. If she didn't, she felt guilty.
I would have said, take him.
Deport
that sucker, but deport that man.
And then she married James Hill, who was a producer at the end. And I think he actually, he got her helped her get some wonderful roles that really showed off her acting ability. But in the end, he wanted to keep working. She didn't. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, after, she had always looked for love. She had always looked for affection and family. And then when she kind of reconciled herself to the fact that maybe that wasn't going to happen for her, she wanted to work. And then she reached the dreaded age of, the age range of the 40s, where back in the Hollywood, back in those days, the studio executives thought women in their 40s were done and through. And so then she wanted work and couldn't get it. And then and then she started also not being able to remember her lines because she had early onset Alzheimer's. So, everything kind of came to her at the wrong time. And so even though she often said that she didn't want her life, if anyone was looking at her life, to think it was sad because there were so many happy moments in it. It is kind of hard to look at it and not think it was sad, especially the part where she, was showing all the symptoms of Alzheimer's.
Which they didn't know what it was at that point in time. People just thought she was drunk or she was unruly, and they didn't. Yeah. And it had to have been so frustrating for her family to know that there's something wrong.
Yes.
And not know what that something is. I can't fathom how devastating that would be.
That was one of the things that Yasmin said after they diagnosed her with Alzheimer's was, what a relief. What a relief to find out that there's a name to her behavior, because she always thought it was drinking. Even though she said, I didn't see my mom drink a lot. She said but I didn't know what else to blame it on. And Rita did drink because she was frustrated that she couldn't memorize her lines and didn't know what was happening with her. And of course that exacerbated the Alzheimer's. So it's a horrible, vicious cycle. But for Yasmin, it was a relief to know, okay, this isn't just my mom, she's not just an alcoholic who's causing these problems to herself. This is a real problem that she has. And what now we can try to fix it, of course, not knowing that it wasn't fixable. But until, when Rita was really the first person that, famous person who had Alzheimer's, and then Reagan came. And then after that, a lot of people.
One thing I want to mention is how involved her second daughter with Ali Khan, Yasmin, is with raising money for Alzheimer's research. So can you kind of talk about what Yasmin's efforts have been in that direction?
She joined with the Alzheimer's Association once she found out what her mother's diagnosis was. And they said, would you like to help us raise funds? And she said, absolutely. So they started these Rita Hayworth galas, which take place still every year. I think they started in 85 or 86. They started before Rita died. And Rita died in 87. And they've raised, millions and millions and millions of dollars. But they have these galas in LA or in New York and Chicago. And then they even had a couple golf tournaments. I went to one of the golf tournaments and I've gone to two of the galas. And they're, very glamorous and very fancy. And
I would expect nothing less.
Yeah. And the golf, I don't golf, but it was fun to go to. That was in Palm Springs and that was really fun. At the Thunderbird, I think is where it was. And so she had a singing career that she was pursuing that she gave up in order to help take care of her mom and to raise funds for Alzheimer's. So she was a very loving daughter. And then, of course, she had her own son who was born before Rita died. And so Rita was by that time not able to recognize anyone, but she would bring her son, Andrew, and put him on Rita's bed so that, they could be together. And so, yeah, very sad and very, very bittersweet, but at least she was able to share her grandson with her mother, But should we start looking at our pictures? Because I've got some pictures.
I would love to do that. Caren has a fantastic photo collection. Before we do that, though, one question, the $1 million question on all these episodes: did Rita cook?
I do not believe she did, which is a great thing because I don't either. I've never seen anything with publicity photographs of her cooking.
There's those, I've seen tons of those with her cooking in a kitchen.
But she's usually in the studio kitchen. She's not at home cooking. I do have one picture of her now that I think of it with her first husband cooking. But again, there's cameras there. And I know I've never heard her kids talk about her cooking. I've never heard any of her husbands talking about her cooking. She was, when she was growing up, she was basically supporting the family with her dancing. So she wouldn't have been cooking then.
Wouldn't have had time.
Right. And then she was a starlet and a star. And I don't think she ever had time to learn or possibly the inclination. And I've never heard Orson Welles say anything about her cooking. I mean, I guess it's possible she did a little bit, but it certainly was not her forte. And so when you asked me to do the kitchen show, I said, I don't cook, and Rita didn't either. So we're going to show pictures instead.
When I first started doing these, I would sometimes have people contact me after every episode and go, well, they didn't cook. Why are you doing that? And I'd say, the point is, it was attributed to them, and I'm going to make it. And also, it's a fun jumping off point.
It's a very fun way to do it. Exactly. That's why I wanted to do this, even though I didn't cook. I thought, it doesn't matter. It's a way to talk about Rita Hayworth, whether or not we end up talking about cooking or not.
Exactly.
But you're right. It's a great way to introduce people to different stars with a cute little end result of having a cool thing that you made.
Exactly. And for all the publicity photos of Rita in a kitchen cooking, I have only found 2 recipes ever attributed to her, which is crazy because I found like a gazillion attributed to Norma Shearer.
Yeah.
But the recipe is from 1937 and it's or 38, and it's an angel food cake. Mm-hmm. And then I found a salad dressing one, and that's it.
That's the one that you got from me. The salad
dressing.
Yes,
I got from you. I got
which was on the back of a publicity photo
where she's cooking.
Which
she didn't do.
No, exactly. But I think, again, if you look at Marilyn Monroe's career, she did like to cook because you can find recipes, you'll find notes, so I think if someone really does like cooking, you somehow see it in movie magazines about their career and that kind of thing. And that just didn't come up with it.
Even like Vincent Price, Joan Crawford, there are some of them that I have covered where I know it's legit.
Yes.
And the others, again, it's still fun.
Yes, exactly.
So let's look at some photos.
Okay. So you can just, these are my favorite photos, some of which are in my book. A lot of them aren't, but they're, for whatever reason, and as we go through them, I'll just tell you why they're my favorite or what's special about them. So this one is obviously at the beginning of her career. This is about 1935 before they Americanized her and took away her beautiful Latina looks. And if you see where the arrow is, this is where she had the electrolysis done. She had electrolysis done on her forehead because they thought she had a small forehead. So they literally took out by the root each follicle in her.
I've actually had some electrolysis type stuff done on my eyebrows. That is so painful. And I screamed so loud, I think I emptied the building.
Oh my gosh.
So,
I can't imagine. I mean, when I just pluck an eyebrow, it hurts.
Yeah.
So she had that done all around her area here, but particularly over here. But this was at the beginning of her career when she was with Fox, before they merged with 20th Century Studios and became 20th Century Fox. She'd been promised the role in Ramona, which eventually she lost when the merge happened, and it went to Loretta Young. But anyway, I just think that's a gorgeous picture. Do you want to switch them off? Or
I'll go ahead and.
Okay. So these have no rhyme or reason in terms of time period, but I kind of did that on purpose. So this is at Lone Pine during the making of The Loves of Carmen, and I just like this one because it's just very, it's on. I love behind the scenes on the set photos. They're my favorites. She made this movie with Glenn Ford, and it was directed by Charles Vidor, who apparently was in love with her and cried when she married Orson Welles during the making of CoverGirl, which he also directed. But here she is just walking on the location in Lone Pine for Loves of Carmen.
In researching this episode, I watched a lot of documentaries about Rita, and I've seen footage of Glenn Ford, and it looks like he was completely in love with her. Like, he almost looks like he's going to cry when he starts to talk about her.
I think he was in love with her. I don't think she was in love with him. I think they may have had a short fling during the making of Gilda. And again, I wasn't there. And Peter Ford says they had a full-fledged, many years long affair. Who am I to argue with Glenn Ford's son? But family members of Rita have said otherwise, that is not what happened, that they were dear friends, but it was not a 30-year love affair or even a love affair on Rita's part, that it was kind of if there was anything, it was kind of a quickie affair during the time of Gilda, and if that. Yeah.
Okay.
So who knows? I kind of believe that. And I don't think that she always, when she is asked about him in interviews, she would always say, what? He's like a brother. She would say he's like a brother. And I also don't think that she would have gotten herself involved with someone who was such a philanderer, because he was such a womanizer. And his son admits he cheated on his wife, who was Eleanor Powell, the dancer, all through their marriage.
Left, right, and center.
Yeah. And Rita knew that about him, and she would not have, wanted to be with someone like that.
What we do know is their chemistry in Gilda is sizzling. It's like
Yes.
Bogart, Bacall. It's like Hepburn. I mean,
Yeah.
it is like they explode on film.
And even in Loves of Carmen, which he hated because he didn't like what he was wearing and all that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, I'm turning off my phone here. Even in Loves of Carmen, I think that it's pretty spicy, and they have a lot of chemistry. And then Lady in Question was their first movie, and then they made Gilda, and then Carmen, and then I'm missing one. Lady in Question is the first one. Oh, for heaven's sake. They made 5. It'll come to me. Gilda, Loves of Carmen, Affair in Trinidad.
Oh, yeah.
And then The Money Trap was the last one in 1966.
And by the way, I do need to say, though, if you guys have never been to Lone Pine, California, any of you watching, it's really cool. They have a museum about history out there with a big focus on film. They have a film screening series. They do a film festival. And if you go to the local film commission and just tell them you want to see the locations, which I did on a trip out there, they just put me and my parents in the truck and drove us out and showed us all the locations. They even had pictures of, here's how it looks in this movie. Here's how it looks today. And they could not have been more generous and hospitable and terrific. So
That's so nice.
See, I have nothing but love for Lone Pine.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds so fun.
Yeah, it was great.
So let's see here. So that's Lee Bowman, and this is on the set of CoverGirl. And this is the marriage scene. And she had actually gotten married on the day that they shot this scene. She married Orson Welles while, just taking a break from work. They went and got married. And she was just, there were several other couples there that day that also got married. So it's interesting, in some of the wedding pictures, there's, Orson and Rita. And then, just kind of, they were in civilian plain clothes. And she was in movie makeup and stuff. And then there's another couple that, they look like young local couple or whatever with these big stars getting married. But she was so happy. And I love this picture because this is probably, except for maybe when she had her children, the happiest period of her life. I also think she was really happy when she was with Victor Mature. We talked about this before.
Yes. About Victor Mature. We love him.
Yeah. She was with him after she divorced her first husband. She was with Victor Mature, and it was really the first time that she ever had adult freedom. And so she was dating Victor Mature, and he was very funny, and she loved that. She was living alone in a rented house for the first time, the one that I went to 2 years ago, because it was for sale and they had an open house. And so I got to go through the whole house, and all of it was exactly the way it looked when she had lived in it. It hadn't changed at all. And I took a bunch of pictures of, me in the spots where I had pictures of her in the house. And it was really fun. But anyway, I think that was her happiest moment. And the happiest time was when she was with Victor Mature. And then she met Orson and was equally happy. And then from there, Orson, they got married, and then he was cheating and stuff like that. And she also, I don't want to blame it all on Orson. She needed a lot of attention, and she would accuse him of cheating when he wasn't cheating. And so, like we talked about, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. He was so sick of being accused of cheating that he eventually started cheating. And he had an affair with Judy Garland. Not that he wouldn't have anyway, but it didn't help that she was saying, I don't trust you, and you're cheating, when he wasn't.
I think a lot of times in these high-profile celebrity marriages, people want to pick a side.
Yeah.
And I think that things are complicated. It's not just, this one person's the villain, this one person's the good guy. It's like, there's a lot of complicated, intricate reasons why something doesn't work out. Yeah. And I think just looking at it from my point of view in Rita's case, it seems like she wanted different things than these men did.
Exactly.
Like Orson, career came first. Yep. Everything else, bottom of the list.
Yep.
Ali Khan, he was not going to change his womanizing ways. Yep. End of story.
And he was very gregarious, liked people around all the time. She wanted to be alone.
Yeah, there's fundamental differences on which you really cannot build a life if they're not in an agreement there.
Right.
So it seems to me that's kind of a big part of of what went wrong in these situations.
And in many marriages. You'd think that they, at that ages that they were, that maybe they would have figured it out at that time. Although she was pretty young when she married Orson Welles, but by the time she got to Ali Khan, you'd think that maybe they would have seen that. But she was pregnant, so it, I think they didn't have a choice.
That probably forced the issue, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, this next photo.
So this is on the cover or on the set of They Came to Cordura, and I just love this photo because she's older, and she's absolutely in a completely different way, is so gorgeous. And of course, I know I shouldn't glamorize smoking. I don't smoke myself, but when you grow up looking at movie star pictures with cigarettes, they look glamorous to you.
They do.
And I just love that she's sitting there smoking, and I love her outfit, and she's obviously rehearsing because she's in rehearsal clothes. But I mean, she's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous at a time when people were saying, oh, she's washed up and she can't do anything. Look at her. I mean, she's absolutely stunning.
Well, it had to be so hard to be older in the public life when you're a woman. It was then back then and today, because like we've seen with Madonna recently, it's like if women don't get any plastic surgery and they age normally, which we're all human,
right,
they're made fun of for looking old and written off.
Yeah.
And then if they get work done, they're made fun of for getting work. It feels like the ultimate no-win situation.
Yeah.
And I hate it. I could be on a soapbox here, but I hate ageism because unless you die, you're gonna get older. Like there's not an opt-out button on this, or frankly, we would all push it.
Right.
So
yes,
I feel
that's
like
why Marilyn is still, such an icon. And I use that word. I hate the way that word is overused nowadays, but Marilyn is an icon because she died young and we never saw. And Elizabeth Taylor, of course, is too, but Elizabeth Taylor definitely had work done and she went that route, and Marilyn probably would have as well.
Yeah.
But yes, it's very sad. I don't see, the women in Hollywood now who age naturally, I think look so much better than the ones that have gotten plastic surgery. They just, the ones that have taken care of themselves and look good, like Susan Sarandon or I'm trying to think who else. There aren't that many actually that you can name that haven't had some kind of work done, but Meryl Streep, if she's had anything done, she's done it so well. Yeah. And Rita did have a couple of facelifts, but I wouldn't call them facelifts. I think I'd call them tweaks because she had incredible bone structure anyway. So she would respond well to that, but she never, stretched herself or added a cheekbones or got her lips, enlarged or anything. She just did like a little eek, which I wouldn't mind either if it would end up looking good, but she didn't go that whole route. And those women didn't back then, back in the 60s when they were starting to age, they did teeny tiny little things like that. They didn't do the whole, change my look completely like so many of them do now.
I just wish that in an American culture, we valued seniors more because I haven't been yet to Japan or China, but I've heard over there seniors are revered.
Yes.
And in America, I feel like it's kind of the opposite of that. I feel like you're old, you're out. And that's kind of our attitude. And one of the side hustles that I do about anywhere from 7 to 9 lectures a month on Hollywood history at assisted living centers all over Los Angeles.
That's fantastic.
Thank you. And one of the enriching things I find about it is these people are still people. They have a soul, they have a heart, they have a personality, they have incredible stories and life experience.
So much to offer. So much to offer.
And one of them asked me one day, she goes, why do you bother hanging out with us?
Aww.
And I said, because you know what? This world is real hard. Life is hard.
Yeah.
And any people that can survive it like you can deserve undying respect.
Yeah.
And you could have just heard a pin drop in the room when I said that. They were all like,
they're like, we love you, Carrie.
It's true,
it is true. You're right.
So much more than our looks. Because I think as women, especially, you're constantly judged on your face, your hair, your makeup, your body.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, that is just an outer shell.
Yeah.
There is so much more to every single one of us than what is on that outside.
It's so true. It's so true. But unfortunately, when you're going through it from the time you're a little girl, as we all did in our generation, it's so hard to undo it. Yeah. I'd love to be able to say, I don't give a, what I look like. You can't say that. No. We all care. We all have things about us that we don't like. And it's all because we were raised with that stupid, probably also we were looking at people, you and I particularly, like Rita Hayworth, and people who were airbrushed and didn't look really anything like that in real life. In fact, that was just perpetuating that problem. But I would love to see that disappear somewhere along the line, where people weren't so worried about being bullied and, all that kind of stuff. But, so this is my, one of my all-time favorite pictures of her. In fact, it's on the inside cover of my book. And it's from Down to Earth, and was taken by Ned Scott, who took all these gorgeous pictures of her for Down to Earth, which is a film I don't like. I'm sorry for all those people that like it. I can't stand it. She looks incredible in it. Her dancing is incredible, but she had no chemistry with Larry Parks, and I don't really like the musical numbers, but she looked incredible. The publicity photos for this film, though, are the best, absolutely beautiful. But I just love this one because it's just gorgeous.
I've got to say, and you and I have talked about this before, Rita, a lot of her movies weren't as great as people think. Like CoverGirl, I saw CoverGirl on a huge screen when I was in college, and I was just thrilled.
That'd be a great way to see it.
But I felt very divided, because part of me was like, she's stunningly beautiful, and the dancing is graceful, and the Technicolor Rita Hayworth is spectacular. But then the whole Gene Kelly resenting her success, and the happy ending was she gives up her whole career to go hang out with Gene Kelly forever. I was like, no.
I know, it's a horrible message that it's sending, Yeah.
And
his whole thing is saying you're relying on your beauty too. You don't rely on your beauty. You shouldn't be happy that you got to the top on your beauty. You should be happy that you're going to get to the top by being a hoofer, or a hoofer. I don't know, I sound like I said hooker.
A dancer.
Yeah. That's the premise of the movie. And it's just, I keep thinking, you spoiled male. I mean, let her have her life, and
and why can't she have the career and the personal life? Why does it have to be either or?
Exactly.
Like, my favorite all-time film is The Red Shoes.
Oh, okay.
And the first time I ever saw it was like in college. It's like, why can't she be a ballerina and be married? Why does it have to be one or the other? And you see, I'm going off on a tangent here, but you do see this come up in movie after movie after movie.
The choice that they have to make the choice between the career and the man or whatever. Yeah, I know. And that movie I like because also she's gorgeous, but it's not one of my favorites. The numbers are great, but most of them.
If you just fast forward past some of it.
I can. Phil Silvers, I don't need to see all of his.
Now this is Bob Schiffer, right? Who is Rita Hayworth's makeup artist.
That's right, and I met him actually, and because when I did one of the documentaries that I did on her, and he had lost all of his photographs in a fire. So I had brought a bunch of photographs, and I showed him this, and I distinctly remember, that's why I love this photo, is he was looking at it, and I think he was in love with her.
Who wasn't? I mean, in fairness.
But I think he really was. I mean, he worked with her from the time she started at Columbia until the end. But he looked at this picture, and he took his hands and kind of ran it over her profile and just went, oh my gosh, like remembering how perfect she was. And so I just love that picture. But they were very, very good friends.
Well, I think too, I mean, you probably spend a lot of time with whoever does your hair and makeup.
Yeah.
So I've talked to other film historians and researchers who've told me that if you really want to know the dirt or the real depth of someone, talk to whoever did their hair and makeup, because that's the person that they're going to spend the most time with, and B, kind of feel the most intimate in terms of, oh my God, so last night they're just going to say stuff too that they probably wouldn't say to the guy who's doing the sound or the person who's doing the camera work or something.
Absolutely.
So there's not this like closeness just due to the nature of that relationship,
especially with her, because she had the same team at Columbia for so long. Helen Hunt did her hair and Schiffer did her makeup, and years and years, every single day in the makeup chair, they had to know everything.
Like nothing happened that they were not aware of.
Sure. I think so, but I just think that's a beautiful picture. That's on the set of Earth as well. So this was my holy grail photo. So as I mentioned before, I've collected vintage photos of her since I was about 10. I saw this photo in a magazine and had looked for it for years and years, because it's just, I think I knew they had a photo session where they were together, but I think this is a picture where somebody was off the set, out of camera angle, out of camera range, that they happened to look at or maybe say something to while they were shooting doing the photo session. And that's what I think this is it's kind of a true candid, and it's just, I just love it. It's so beautiful, and they were such good friends, and you can really tell how much they love each other on that photo. I think as friends, and he maybe loved her more, but it's just a great shot. I mean, she's so stunning.
I've been so lucky to see this on a giant screen several times, including one year. It was the opening night of Noir City at the Egyptian in Hollywood. And
was amazing.
The minute you see her on screen, the audience just goes ballistic. That's probably one of the best entrances in movie history because
she whips her hair back.
Oh,
she just looks amazing. I know, she's just, it makes you wonder, even though I love the fact that it's noir, so it's in black and white. It would be so interesting to see what that would have been like in color, because her hair was red, you know, and it would have been, when you watch Carmen and you watch CoverGirl, you just think, the color is so gorgeous and her hair is so gorgeous. What would that have looked like, in color? I wish they'd find color footage of it somewhere.
Oh, wow.
There has been some home movie footage of her in coming from work on the set of Gilda, and she's got the red hair and they're gorgeous, but would be really cool to see that in Technicolor like that. So this is a publicity photo for You Were Never Lovelier, which was 1942, and it's just a beautiful pinup photo that I've always liked, and it's not one that has been seen very often. So this is her and Fred, and so to dispel a rumor, Fred Astaire on the set on the Columbia lot for You Were Never Lovelier, he did not ever say that she was his favorite partner.
Because I've heard that, and I know that's not true.
I see it. I just saw it in a magazine the other day, and they say it's in his autobiography. It is not in his autobiography. And if someone, show me the quote if you have it, because he would never have said that, who his favorite was. And he said one time, I would never say who my favorite is because I don't want to hurt any of these women's feelings. He always said Bing Crosby, because that was, it got him off the hook. He was in 2 movies with Bing Crosby. And I do believe that he really adored Rita, maybe more than a lot of his other co-stars, because Helen Hunt, the hairdresser, said that he gave her a beautiful jeweled ballerina pin.
Oh, wow.
And, he was very happily married, so that I don't believe anything happened. He was also much, much older than she was. And she was dating or married all the time that they were dancing together. But I think he admired her, and I think he thought she was a very sweet girl. And he knew that she was a dancer because he had worked with her father, Eduardo, in vaudeville.
Oh, yeah.
And so he said later, it was so strange to have known Eduardo in vaudeville, and all of a sudden now I'm dancing with his daughter, because she's 24 on here, I think, 24. And he's, let's see if it's 40. He's always a year older than the year. So he was 43. So he's quite a bit older than her. But they had amazing chemistry. And they made the 2 films together. They made You'll Never Get Rich, which is 41. And then You Were Never Lovelier in 42. And they were both super successful. But he did not want to make another one because he didn't want to get caught in another partnership like he had with Ginger, and like he had, even though it was successful, and like he had a partnership with his sister before he'd been with Ginger, and he did not want to do that. So he never made another movie with someone. He never made more than 2 movies with another leading lady. He did the things with Barry Chase, the TV shows later on, and he made 4 of those. But no, he absolutely loved Rita. Just thought she was the sweetest and a wonderful dancer. But she may have been his favorite in his mind, but he never would have said it. I think Barry Chase actually probably was his favorite dancer.
Now, is this from the Shorty George number?
Yeah, she's wearing a coat though, because she must have been cold or something. So you can't see the top. But yeah, I love this because they're both just laughing and smiling, and she's laughing and smiling, and it's on the set of You Were Never Lovelier, and it's while they were shooting the Shorty George number. And this is from My Gal Sal. This is a wardrobe test shot, which I love because these are very hard to find, especially of her. And this is, and I mentioned this in our aborted
our
video.
failed sound.
But if anyone wants to look at some incredible wardrobe color footage of Rita Hayworth, they should go to historicfilms.com and just look up Rita Hayworth. And there's several long pieces of wardrobe and hair color footage from My Gal Sal and Blood and Sand, because they were Fox when she was a 20th Century Fox, as well as Gene Tierney, Betty Grable, June Haver, all these people, Tyrone Power, Anthony Quinn, all the big Fox people. But she was loaned out to Fox, and so the 2 movies that she made there, they have her wardrobe footage, and it is unbelievable because she's smiling, and it's silent. she's smiling, she's laughing, she's joking with these people, she's twirling around in these gorgeous costumes. I mean, if you love Rita, you absolutely have to see it.
I will be doing that later today. Trust me on
you're gonna love it. I watched all of them, every single one of the, not just Rita's, but all the stars, because they're fascinating.
Oh, this is another really good one
here.
I
love this. And this is when she was on loan to Warner's.
Okay.
And she made Strawberry Blonde. And I just think this is a really beautiful, really different, and it's not shot by the people the Columbia photographers who often shot her in a very similar way. It's a different kind of pose because it was done by Warner's, and probably Scotty Wellborn, I'm guessing. And this one is just kind of a wacky hairstyle. And this is very early, I'm guessing maybe 38, 39.
Okay.
But it's a hair, hair. She's modeling a hairstyle.
They look kind of like victory rolls, which had become really popular in the 40s.
They do. Maybe that's why she was wearing them. I'm not sure, but I just think it's a sweet picture, and very much not the sexy love goddess, more of just the sweet girl next door. This one I love because it's beautiful, and she never had a real wedding dress. So she actually had an alternate of this photo, the full-length version, in her home. That after she married Ed Judson, she had this photograph of her wearing this wedding dress that was not her wedding dress, but it must have meant something to her that she would have either liked to have had a wedding or something. But you can see photos of her in her house in the early 40s, late 30s, early 40s, and you can see that picture in the background. The close-up one here is, I think, the most beautiful. It's just stunning. But this is about 1939. And this is 43. This is during the time that she was shooting CoverGirl. And again, that's kind of a different, she's got a turtleneck on, she's got the very 40s hair, and it's kind of a different pose than you usually see. And this I love because, yes, this is Rebecca, the daughter by Orson, and she looks just like Orson.
Yeah, that's got to be interesting.
She looks very much like Orson, but Rita was ecstatic, about having a baby. And I just think this is a great picture. I just love that Rita looks so happy and she's so gorgeous, and that she had this baby that she wanted kids so much. And she always said about her daughters that they were the greatest things that ever happened to her. And she was a very loving mother, but as Rebecca later said, back then the women put their husbands first. They didn't put their kids first. They put that's the way women were raised back then. And that doesn't mean they all chose to do that, but I know a lot of my aunts and my mother, they always talked about their husbands and not so much about their kids. And as a mother, I'm just the opposite. I put my kids first. That's why I'm divorced. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I don't know if I'm kidding, but
that's right. Your kids are awesome.
Yeah, I always put my kids first. And so, I remember Stephen Bogart, Humphrey Bogart's son with Lauren Bacall, also said, my mom would go off to Africa to shoot The African Queen to be with my dad, and we were just left, and that's what women did back then, and that's what she did. She always put the husband first. She wouldn't put the work first, but of course she had to,
pay for
everything. Exactly. But so Rebecca said, my mother was very loving and very warm when she was there, but she wasn't always there. So I think both she and Yasmin had a tough childhood in that regard.
And plus when you've got both parents that are super world famous, that's got to be really psychologically hard to kind of deal with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is the famous hair cutting session. That's Helen Hunt, who I talked about before, who was her longtime hairdresser. And this was preparing her to have her haircut for the lady from Shanghai. And there's the finished there's the result, which I love. I absolutely love. And I mentioned this to you once before, how in The Lady from Shanghai, I think the most beautiful footage of her, or one of the top 5 of her on screen, is the super, super close up. And Orson Welles was the director, so he's the one that arranged that super close up of her singing "Please Don't Kiss Me."
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh,
and she's just perfect, But I love this because she's happy to start doing something different where she can maybe show off her acting chops. She's cut off all his hair that she's been associated with for so long. She's going to be with Orson in Acapulco, and when they were separated, but then for the making of the film, they were together again. And then when the film was over, they separated again. But she was, excited about this period in her life.
I kind of argue that Rita Hayworth and Veronica Lake were probably the two most famous for their hair. And then they both had to change their hair. Veronica for the factory issue, because the long peekaboo would get caught in the machinery.
Right.
And then Rita did it for artistic reasons. But it's kind of interesting how that hair, to a large degree, kind of defined their personas.
Yeah. And in Veronica Lake's case, after she cut her hair, she really didn't do anything very, her success was kind of
and she didn't look like the same person.
No, she didn't.
Rita still did, though.
So I love this because I keep saying how gorgeous she is. I mean, how many times can I say that? But she's almost otherworldly gorgeous, where you look at her and think, how can anybody be that beautiful? Now, I don't like this movie, Salome, but her hair, her makeup, her clothes are so out of this world. And this is just her sitting on the set, and she just, it's perfection. I mean, I think that's why I also like her, and I also like Marilyn, is they're just my idea of feminine perfection, like ideal. The way they do their hair, the clothes that they wear, the way they look. I think when I was a little girl, it started out just being like, oh, I want to be like them, and then as you get older, you want to know more about their personal lives and stuff. But she just, just sitting on the set like that, she just looked incredible. Horrible movie though. So I love this one. This is Ann Sheridan. And this is about 39 or 40. And I don't even know, this is at some nightclub, because I also have a picture of her with Ed, her first husband, where she's wearing that outfit. But I just think it's so cute because they were both just really rising at this point, because Ann Sheridan was at Warner's. And Rita was probably at Warner's during this. I mean, that's probably how she knew Ann Sheridan was. She was being loaned out to Warner's.
What I like about this photo is so many times I feel like in old Hollywood, or even now, women are pitted against each other. And there's always this mentality of there's only room for one woman in one field, and that's going to be you or whatever. So to me, the idea that these women could be friends and they didn't have to all be feuding or fighting over roles or fighting over men, that they could be buddies and that they could be colleagues and friends. And I love that. So this photo actually is really terrific. I think this is probably one of my favorite ones you showed me.
Isn't that great? And I think that with Rita too, women, first of all, she was very, very shy, so she was very hard to get to know, but she wasn't someone who was competitive. She couldn't have cared less if some woman came on who was more beautiful than she was, or even though there probably wasn't anybody, but like when she made Only Angels Have Wings, Jean Arthur wouldn't even be in the same photo with her. Because she was so intimidated by Rita's beauty. Well, Rita Hayworth had none of that in her. She was a sweet, nice person, very shy, so a lot of people didn't get to know her, but she would never be in competition with someone like that. I mean, when she made Pal Joey with Kim Novak, they got along great. And even though Kim Novak was kind of moving in to Rita's place, Rita didn't care. So this is, again, a cute picture of her after the haircut. This is on the set of You Were Never Lovelier, and this is just a out of rehearsal photo. And I just love it because it's either she was shooting possibly or she was rehearsing. It's just a cute picture. It's a snapshot. So that was actually taken by a fan. It's a gorgeous picture.
Here's another.
Yeah. And this was after she left Ali Khan, and she was actually at a nightclub with Bob Schiffer. But again, this kind of captures her shy demeanor. This is, I think, the real Rita that you're ever going to see. Was just very quiet. And I love this one. This is Errol Flynn and her during the junket for Santa Fe Trail. And she was working with Warner's at the time, and they were all Warner's films, Santa Fe Trail, Virginia City. It's just a cute picture of them together that you don't see very often. So here she was pregnant and making Tonight and Every Night, and that's why she's got this canister in front of you. It's to promote CoverGirl, but she was actually filming Tonight and Every Night, which is another movie that I actually really love. It's in color and has some of the most beautiful shots of her that you will ever see. But I just think that's a cute picture. And anytime you see her hair like that with her, where it's parted down the middle and she's pregnant. Usually. This one is kind of from the old, when she was making Fire Down Below. And so she's, aged a little bit, but I love it because it's not retouched at all. You see the wrinkle. I mean, she's still drop dead gorgeous, but I love that it's completely unretouched. You see she's got makeup on, but this is also during Affair in Trinity, or not, the one I just met, Fire Down Below. And it's just a fun, candid. I love pictures of her where she's happy and smiling. This is at Grauman's. And this was during the making of Tales of Manhattan. So you see Charles Boyer, Edward G. Robinson, Charles Lawton, and Sid Grauman, but the three leading men were in the film with her. And I love that picture. Look at her cool shoes doing.
Oh,
shoes. I want that suit. This is a period where she was with Victor Mature. And I actually blew this up because she's with him in the photo, but it's just such a stunning photo of her. And she was so happy. And, that's all. She's gorgeous.
Just my 2 cents. And I have talked about this at great length with his daughter, Victoria Mature.
Yeah.
But we wish he and Rita would have ended up together. I think Victor would have been a lot better bet than Orson. That's my 2 cents.
I do too. I absolutely agree. I mean, I don't know if it would have lasted, but I think that he would have been a better husband.
Absolutely.
So here she is with Harry Cohn, her nemesis, and Anita Louise. And even though she couldn't stand Harry Cohn, she would be in photos with him. And there are pictures of them together smiling. But he made life very difficult for her because she wouldn't sleep with him. And yet she still went to the top at Columbia. I mean, the public loved her. It didn't matter whether she slept with Harry Cohn or not.
Is it true that her first husband, Edward Judson, tried to pimp her out and get her to sleep with him or anybody? Because I always heard that rumor too.
I know, I have too. And you know what? I don't know what to believe about that. I just don't know. I don't.
It's hard to know.
I've never heard of her sleeping around. I heard she had an affair with Anthony Quinn during the making of Blood and Sand. And that's really the only one I've ever heard about during the time she was married to Judson. So I kind of think that might not be true. She wasn't somebody who had, she wanted to be a star, but I don't think she would have gone. I mean, if she was going to sleep with anyone, why not sleep with the boss? If you're that way, but she refused him. And I think I don't think that she was like that. He maybe tried to do that.
I have no question.
But yeah, but he was like, ugh. But he obviously captured, he saw in Rita things that other people didn't see. So this is at her divorce from Judson, when she was in court. And this is another picture you don't see very often, but and it's interesting because she looks sad and just
tired.
Tired, she's got no retouching or anything, but it's still a beautiful picture. And I love her hat. And this is when she's at the press conference to announce the filming of Fire Down Below. So she was with Jack Lemmon, and another happy picture. I just love the happy pictures. So this is with no eye makeup. She's got lipstick on, but no eye makeup or anything like that. And I have a variation of this in my book, but I just love it because it's just so natural. And a lot of people wouldn't even recognize her.
Yeah, it actually doesn't quite look like her at this point.
So this is her with her father, Eduardo, on the left, and on the right is her grandfather, who they call Padre. And he was also a dancer. So she came from this long generation of dancers. And she started dancing when she was, learning when she was, by the time she could walk, but actually supporting the family with her father when she was 13. So, but this is a very rare photo. I wish I would have had this photo when I did my book, because it's not in my book, and it's a really rare photo. And again, this is another candid that I love. I love the candids. And this was taken by a fan. And then oftentimes if the fan lived in Los Angeles and took a picture, then they'd wait for her after work at the studio and get her to sign the photo. So I just think that's a naturally beautiful photo. Yeah. And this one too, where she's pregnant. I mean, can you imagine having a candid photo taken of you that looks like that? I mean, just stunning. But that's one of my all-time favorites. And again, a pregnant photo. During a radio broadcast. She was pregnant with Rebecca here, who was Orson Welles' child, and very, very happy period in her life. This one too. And there you can see she's actually wearing a maternity outfit, but I think this is outside their home at the time.
Well, the hair's not split down the middle or parted down the middle though.
No. Oh, no, you're right. That's what makes me think maybe it's later.
Okay.
Because after she had Rebecca, then she went back to the side part. I shouldn't say she wore constantly that way when she's pregnant, but most of the photos that you see where her hair is in that style, she's pregnant. I shouldn't say she always wore it that way when she was pregnant though, but I love that one. And this one I love too, because this came from her and Orson's secretary. And I love it. Shifra Heron. Mm-hmm. And it looks like, to me, I don't know what's happening here, but it looks like maybe she's getting ready to go out for the evening and she's having this picture taken of Rebecca and their dog Pookles before she goes out, she's getting her hair ready. And I just love it. She's just wearing her checkered pants and, it's a real, it's glamorous, but it's also an at-home photo. That's Bob Schiffer that she's with there. And this is after Ali Khan. And so she looks very sad there, but she does. But she did go out dancing and it looks like she's wearing jeans. So they're all wearing kind of casual clothes, it looks like. So I'm not sure where they are, but She, it might be during the time that she was in Reno getting the divorce. It might be during that time, but I just think it's sad, but it's also very pretty. So this is her and Orson publicity for Lady from Shanghai, which you and I talked about. It's a good movie, but I don't really know what's going on in it. But
I don't either. But there are some noirs, I think, including The Big Sleep or To Have and Have Not, where you don't always know what's going on.
Yes,
but the ride is so fun. You just kind of stop caring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The only thing I don't like, or not the only thing, but one of the things I don't like about it is his voice is dubbed. It's his voice, but they looped it later. And I hate that. In fact, that's one of the reasons why some of the 60s movies are so hard for me to watch. I'm trying to think of the one that I was watching recently where the entire thing was dubbed later. And it's hard. I know they had to in some cases, but in this one, there's maybe because they were in Acapulco and they were on location, so they had to, but it's hard to watch that when it doesn't sometimes look right even though they do a good job of the lip syncing, it doesn't sound right. But that's a beautiful picture of them together. This is one of my all-time favorites from Shanghai. It's just absolutely perfect. And of course, she's smoking, elbow length gloves and the beautiful dress. I mean, just perfect.
And of course, the famous Hall of Mirrors sequence. She's in that film and she's like, I don't want to die. It's it's pretty chilling stuff.
It is. That particular line, I agree. She's just, her acting is so good.
So underrated as an actress. So underrated.
And then here she is again they're getting ready to go to Acapulco where they'll shoot the movie. And she was very happy because they were reconciled for that period. This is, this is for Separate Tables. And of course, her acting in this movie is phenomenal.
So good.
Yes, so good. And I think that not enough people appreciate that. This was her favorite role that she ever had. And it's too bad she wasn't allowed more of that kind of role because she was just so good in it. This is a makeup and hat test. And this is for You'll Never Get Rich. And I just love these because, again, unretouched, and you can tell she's got a lot of movie makeup on. It's very thick. But I love that it's not, retouched at all. You can see all the little blemishes and like a normal person, And I love this one, too, because it's the back of her dress and her hair. There's several pictures that I have of her where they show the back and the front, and I just think they're fun. This is the front.
It's the last one.
Oh, is it? Okay. And that's also from You'll Never Get Rich. But yeah, those are just some of my favorites. I have so many favorites. In fact, when we did the first round of this show, I had, about 100 photos, and I just cut them right in half just because. Maybe next time I'll show them.
Yeah, we'll do this. In a separate segment from you and I'm going to make the angel food cake.
Yes.
So we can also do another interview, and then I'll do a separate segment where I make the salad.
Yes, that would be awesome. That would be great.
Well, Caren, this has been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy I caught you while you were in Los Angeles.
Well, I'll be here. I'll be here off and on all the time for work and also for. Just because I love LA so much. I can't be away for very long. And I love seeing you and all my friends.
Yes.
So it's so nice to be back. So fun. And thank you so much for being patient in getting me, for us to be able to arrange for me to be on.
Well, you too. And thank you, Caren, for being with us today and sharing your incredible Rita Hayworth knowledge. Thank you to everybody watching. And please stay tuned for more food, fun, and film history from Hollywood Kitchen.